Okay. I actually had a lot of difficulty choosing which speech to listen to for this assignment. My love of history combined with the sheer amount of options left me feeling the same way I get whenever I walk down the ice cream aisle or am looking through Netflix. In the end, I decided to go with John F. Kennedy's speech on the Cuban Missile Crisis because the Cold War has always been fascinating to me. And honestly, JFK's voice is so novel. It was amusing just to play this while I was working and having my coworkers walk by. We'll get back to more, or we'll get back to me listening to it while working later and how that affected my listening skills. But this speech begins with President JFK addressing his fellow citizens, and the overarching message appears to be about informing the people of the United States of a threat from Russia via the island of Cuba. But I think it would be false to assume that this is the main point of the speech. I believe the primary objective here was to actually sway global opinion to believe that Russia was an unprovoked aggressor, and that while the United States wished for peace, we wouldn't be intimidated at all. JFK does this in multiple ways, and it is throughout his entire speech. One example would be the way he included cities throughout Latin and South America as potential targets for nuclear warheads. I'm by no means an expert on the geopolitics of this time, but the odds of Russia wanting to launch missiles to destroy Lima or Mexico City seems a little bit slim compared to any of the major U.S. cities that would be within range. I would guess that JFK is actually saying to the nations around the United States, like Mexico and Peru, hey guys, this is not just a U.S. problem. They could just as easily be doing this to destroy you. This is an interesting tactic that creates solidarity through fear. But if I lived in Mexico City when this aired, I would want the U.S. to prevail through this crisis. I probably wouldn't sleep well until the missiles had been removed. Kennedy further vilifies the USSR through repeatedly quoting them and following it up by saying, this statement is false, or this statement was false. He leaves no room for argument. The message is clear, and it says that Russia is a liar. He once again attempts to turn the world against Russia by pointing out that treaties have been violated, and he calls upon the United Nations to hold them accountable. Again, he's trying to make it a global issue, saying Russia has wronged all of us. Just because they're pointing a gun at us at the moment doesn't mean everybody else shouldn't be involved and concerned with what is happening. He makes multiple statements that outright claim that Cuba is subjugated by a foreign power, Russia, and has an entire section of the speech that addresses the citizens of Cuba directly, stating that he knows they are not the enemy. This is especially clever as it creates a narrative that allows for a potential U.S. invasion of Cuba, where the U.S. can be labeled as liberators, I'm doing quotations off screen, sorry, liberators, as opposed to invaders. In my opinion, again, not an expert, but this speech seems like a masterpiece. As far as I can tell, it expertly weaves together a tale that paints Russia as an enemy that the whole world needs to face. It is a balancing act of showing the world a very real and terrifying threat who has placed the world on the brink, while also inspiring courage that they would be faced and they would be stopped. It says, I do not want to fight, but you have pushed me into a corner, and if you do not back down, I will hold nothing back. And I am in the right. I cannot begin to imagine the difficulty of having to write a speech that walks so fine an edge. At one point while listening to the speech, I heard a coworker ask if anyone else could hear static or white noise. I explained that I was listening to an old speech and that was what they were hearing. But honestly, even though the quality of the recording wasn't great compared to today's standards, JFK he has a unique accent, but he speaks in such a measured and clear way that I never once felt like I had difficulty understanding anything he was telling me. The only time that I began to lose interest was in the latter part of his speech when he reached, I think it was his sixth point. I realized that I could not remember some of his earlier points and started thinking that maybe I should have been taking notes. I took the speech home at this point and listened to it a whole second time while also following around along with the written text. And I was amazed at how much easier it was to retain information and understand the subtext. My last several jobs have all required extensive multitasking, and I'm starting to realize that while my ability to do several things at once is cool, in my opinion, if I really want to actually master and fully understand something, I need to either listen to it several times while doing multitasking or sit down and focus 100% on it just once.